Hey guys, welcome back to my channel Lush Gardener. So somebody had asked me about a soil mix wherein they wanted to know if they can mix mountain soil along with sand and just use that as a mix. Now I would say it will be good enough because both of them are a gritty material. Both of them are very well draining, basically used in the soil for making the soil mix loose, porous and well draining. But there is going to be a small little problem over here. As we all know, sand is basically silica. It does not have any nutritional value. It's basically an inorganic material. Apart from that, it does not have any tendency of retaining any moisture, which of course is very important for our succulents. But remember guys, succulents are living plants. They also need a little bit of water in order to survive. But this is going to kind of take out all the water from the pot. If you're only going to use sand, it is not going to work out really well, especially the river sand or the aquarium sand, because one, it does not have any nutritional value. Secondly, it does not have the capacity to retain moisture, due to which there are chances that the succulent will get dehydrated. Of course, the succulent is not going to get rotted in sand, but it will start getting dehydrated at a much faster rate because the sand is not going to give a chance for the succulent to have a quick drink. Apart from that, the best thing about the sand, now I'm very happy that I found these plastic cups, and it is becoming much more easy for you guys to notice, because ideally you tend to see the soil from above, but today you'll be able to see the side profile of sand and you can see how gritty it is. There is so much of space in between the granules or the grains. So this is the type of sand you need to have. So it should have a lot of granular particles in it, which can give that space in between. You can see there's a lot of space in between, which helps the roots tend to grow much better in this. Now the second thing was mountain soil. Again, a side profile of mountain soil. You can see the amount of space in between. This is where all the roots can reach out. Now mountain soil also does not have a very high amount of nutrients, but as compared to sand, it does contain a little bit of nutrients because this is picked up from the mountains. Apart from that, the water retaining capacity is also a little bit more than the sand that we have. But it is not going to be enough for our succulent. If we are going to have a mix of both of this, let's say 60% of mountain soil and let's say 40% of the sand, regular sand or aquarium sand or river sand, whichever is available with you. But what's going to happen is both of these will definitely make your soil mix well draining, super well draining in fact. It is going to work out really well. Your succulent is of course not going to die in this mix, but again, as I said, there will be an issue of dehydration. Especially for me, I come from a very dry environment. If I'm going to use this, apart from that, my pots are made out of clay or earthen pots or concrete. That is again going to absorb all that excess moisture. Plus, this is also going to dry out fast. So my succulent is going to have a little hard time keeping itself hydrated because one, the environment is dry. Apart from that, the mix that I have also tends to dry out fast without giving the succulent enough time to have a quick drink. So that's the reason why I tend to add a little bit of garden soil. What I would say is it's always best to experiment and see how it tends to work out. Probably you are going to try this for the first time. Probably you can just use one small little succulent in this and try and see how the succulent reacts to it. Of course, the succulent is not going to die in this. It will do quite well. But we need to check in terms of how hydrated the succulent is going to stay. Apart from that, nutrients level is going to be quite well. This one, as I said, will not have any nutrients. The mountain soil might have a little bit of minerals or natural resources or natural fertilizers in this because it comes from the mountains. Mountain soil, any which ways, is not very, very fertile. It is slightly, it has a little bit of, nutrients in that, but not highly fertile like our garden soil. So nutrients is something also that is going to affect the succulent, but a lot of times the succulent will do well in very minimum nutrient soil as well. So that's where we have to experiment and see. Now guys, I personally will not conduct this experiment because I know very well this mix is not going to work very well for my environment. As I said, my environment is very dry. Apart from that, I use concrete pots. So there will be a major issue with watering. I will be very confused about watering, when to water, when not to water, because it's going to be very difficult to understand. Apart from that, when you are going to use the stick method to push it into the soil, it might be very difficult because these are larger granules. They might not stick to the wooden stick or whatever you are using. These will any which ways not stick to the stick. It will be very difficult to understand. So that's the reason why I would say experiment and see. Probably it might work out for your environment, especially if you are from a very high humid environment. Maybe it might work. I'm not very sure. This is something you can experiment because I don't have that amount of humidity in my environment. So this is something that I can leave it up to you. And another important thing what I wanted to share is this is the grey construction sand that I was talking about. Again, you can see the grey construction sand also has a lot of space in between because they also have larger granules, just like our aquarium sand. This is the aquarium sand and this is the grey sand. You can see the amount of space or the granules, they are big enough for the roots to maneuver inside the soil, navigate inside the soil and start growing. You can see the grey sand is also works fantastic. I have used it a couple of times. I've already made a video on it and you have also seen the results of it. If not, I will put the link in the description below. You can check it out. So this is the grey sand which I usually tend to use at times when the aquarium sand is not available. And then we have pumice. Pumice, I don't even have to tell. Everyone knows how pumice tends to look like, and you can see the amount of space in between each of the grains. Again, this gives a good amount of aeration to the soil, makes the soil very loose, porous. Again guys, just because it's very loose, porous and it has a lot of space in between doesn't mean that you can use your succulents only in pumice. Again, the same thing, just like our sand, it does not have any nutritional value. It does not retain much moisture. The water will start to drain out and over the period of time it will start to dry out much faster without giving our succulent enough time to have a quick drink. And then I have some fine sand that was basically filtered off. This is the filtered sand, the fine sand. You can see the fine sand is very, very fine. Right now it's not completely dry, it's not completely wet, but you will be getting a fair idea of how dense it looks inside this cup. You can see this, it's very dense. Now imagine if I'm going to add garden soil to this, it's going to become even more compact. So we have to be extremely careful that we do not use anything that is very, very fine. Otherwise, after adding garden soil to this, this is going to get very compact. Again, the same thing, the issue with this is if you're going to add water, this might stay moist for a longer period of time. The fine sand can get very dense. It tends to retain a lot of moisture. And if you're going to use, because you cannot use only this fine sand, again the same thing, no nutritional value. But if you're going to add garden soil to this, this will 100% turn into a concrete kind of a texture, which will be very difficult for the roots to breathe beneath. So we have to be extremely careful. That's the reason why we do not use the fine sand. We filter the sand and we don't discard. Basically, I don't discard. I tend to use it for my for making of my concrete pots. But ideally, this should not be used in our succulents because this is again going to turn very compact over the period of time. It will be very dense and it's going to kind of store excess moisture, which is not good for our succulents. And I had also a request about the garden soil, because some people said that when they filter their garden soil, there are some granules that tend to break apart later on, and then that tends to clog up the soil or tends to make the soil compact. I completely agree with you, because the soil tends to change from region to region, from city to city. Now my garden soil, I have washed this. So these were the larger granules that are present in my garden soil. Again, it depends from where I'm taking the garden soil. The red garden soil is not of the same consistency everywhere. In some places I might find a garden soil that is very clayey, and in some places I might find my garden soil with these kind of pebbles in it. And usually these are covered with garden soil. That's why when we tend to water it, they don't tend to break further, because these are already rocks. But when I tend to take out the garden soil, this is already covered with garden soil, due to which it tends to look like it is piece of soil, but actually these are small pebbles which were ideally covered with the garden soil, and it tends to look like those are large granules of garden soil. But actually after washing it, this is how it tends to look like, and these do not further break down. Probably after watering it, the color might go off or the soil might get washed off from this, but inside it is these rocks, these small little rocks. So usually this is what tends to also contain in my garden soil as well. So probably this is why my garden soil, when I tend to use garden soil 20%, it does not make the soil mix very compact, or it does not clog the soil Probably it's because of these tiny little, now of course these are the bigger ones that I've selected, but there are smaller ones like these, very small ones, which are usually covered with garden soil, but after washing they tend to look like this. So this is one of the reason why my garden soil tends to work out really well. Again, this is region wise, it's not necessary that you are going to find this kind of mix everywhere. But at the end of the day, what I would say is, if you are making a mix, add a little bit of garden soil, because that is what's going to help. But as I said, you will have to experiment and see how it tends to work out. I will do a quick experiment and show you how you can use that little bit of garden soil. So now this is just an example. It's a small container. Let's say that this is 60% and this is 40% of your gritty material. Now guys, again, this is an example. Please don't think that you only have to use this. You can use any gritty material that you have. I'm sure a lot of you might not have mountain soil. It's absolutely okay to use only your regular river sand or construction sand or this gray sand, whatever is available. If you have pumice also can be used. So just use a mix like this. So this is just an example. Now let's say that you have made a mix like this. Now this is garden soil, and remember, as I said, in my garden soil there are these small little fragments of rocks and stuff like that. What I had shown you, like these pebbles, they are also present in my garden soil. So we will take only a little bit of garden soil, just in case if you feel that your garden soil tends to get very compact, and then just mix it nicely. If you tend to see that the garden soil is a little less, you can add some more. And this is filtered garden soil. So this is how you can make your mix, and trust me, I don't think this mix is going to get compact in any way. It is going to stay very loose, it's going to stay very porous. I can add even more of the garden soil in this, because I can see that the soil mix is going to be very loose and very porous. It's very difficult for this soil mix to turn compact because of the amount of gritty material that we have in this. So we have our gritty material, we have our sand, and we also have our garden soil in this. Now again, the garden soil is little less. I can still add some more because this mix is very loose, very porous. This is not going to turn compact in any way. You can see this. And in case if you are worried, what you can always do is you can just sprinkle garden soil on the top layer a little bit, and then just plant your succulent in that. You can see it is going to be a perfect kind of soil mix that you can use. Now this is a type of soil mix, most probably, I don't know because I haven't been to a natural habitat of a succulent, but probably this is pretty much how the succulent soil might look in their natural habitat, wherein it is very gritty, it is very rocky. At the same time, there is a little bit traces of that soil, because even in nature, even if you go on the mountain, guys, because I have picked up this mountain soil from the mountains, and there is a little bit of this powder, a little bit of this soil that is always present in the rocky soil as well. It's not that it's going to be completely rocky. There will be a little bit of sediments of the soil in any kind of soil mix that you might find on the mountain. So you can see a very little trace of that garden soil, which is not going to turn it very compact. So probably you can try something like this, and let's see if that works out. But again, as I said, it depends upon your environment. You have to amend your soil mix a little bit depending upon your environment and climate. For me, this kind of soil mix tends to work out really well, and this is the type of soil mix that I have been using for a couple of years now, and my succulents have been doing quite well. Apart from, of course, giving full credit to my environment and climate, that has been helping me out a lot. But overall, the efforts that I've put in making the soil mix has worked out really well. I initially had a very tough time growing succulents because of the improper soil that I had. I used to only grow it in red soil, and that's where all the problem used to start. I had no clue about all of these things, but eventually, as and when I started experimenting it, it's all about experimenting it and seeing what tends to work out really well in your environment. If you feel that something is not working out, do not repeat that again. So that is how I have learned through the hard way, with a lot of trial and error. I did have a lot of casualties in the initial stage, but now things are much better. Only thing is, during the monsoons, I do have a little bit of rot because, of course, a lot of moisture. Even after covering the succulents, at times the water tends to fall into the succulent pots, and monsoon season is the only time that I have a little difficult time. Apart from that, summers and winters are the best time. My succulents are in their full glory. They look absolutely beautiful. Only during the monsoon time, I have to be a little bit careful. One, there is very limited sunlight. Secondly, it's moist, it's humid, there is water everywhere, so it becomes a little bit difficult. But on an average, I would say probably 1 or 2 succulents do rot during the monsoon season. You can see, despite having a very gritty soil mix even then. So you can imagine if you're going to use cocoa peat and stuff like that, that tends to retain a lot of moisture, you know what's going to happen. So it's all about experimenting, taking care of your succulents. As I've already spoken about this multiple times, if you are a beginner, do not rush in. Buy only few succulents so that you can handle and take care of them much better. Again guys, this is just the basic soil mix. If you want, you can also add a little bit of more pumice. Pumice is not needed when you have a soil mix like this because it's already going to be very gritty. But if you are a person who's not finding mountain soil easily, then probably you can opt for pumice. Now this pumice, I think it is somewhere between 1 mm to 2 mm. Definitely less than 2 mm because that's what the seller had mentioned, 1 to 2 mm. So this is definitely less than 2 mm. So if you have any pumice that you find which is around 2 mm, is going to work out really well. So here we go. Our soil mix is completely ready. You can use anything as long as you find the granules to be this big. The granules of your sand should be big enough like this, and then it is going to work out really well. I don't know what mm is this. Again, I'm very bad with measuring the grains of this, so whatever the sellers tell me, that's what I believe. But I think just by looking at the image, you will get a fair idea of how the granules should look like. This was the aquarium sand. Even the gray sand has the same granules, and this is more than enough. This is not going to turn your soil compact if you're going to add the right amount. Again guys, the test method, remember, as I said, you have to do the soil test method for a week or for 2 weeks, check and then make your soil mix, then make your permanent soil mix. Initially, the test is very required if you are doing this for the first time. Otherwise, you do not want to end up changing the soil mix and changing and repotting the succulent. That is going to damage your succulent. So do everything in advance, do the soil test method in advance. That is going to save you a lot of hassle later on. So guys, that's all about it. I hope that this video was helpful to you. If it was, please hit the like button. And if you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing to it. Until then, take care, stay safe and keep propagating.